ShingieChatsLife is Shingie looking good.
Welcome, Tyler. No, thank you for coming here. And today's episode is like, I'm probably going to say this about a lot of them, but it's a special one for its own reason, in the sense that, like, I've known you since maybe about year 9 to like 13, going on 14, and you've played like an immense like role in my life as well, like in your own way, as you're like a distant brother, like a soul brother.
Yeah, true.
So, like, honestly, I'm glad to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to come here, man.
No, that's I'm a pleasure to be here, you know. It's great to be here. I'm glad you got me here. I think it's great to sit here and talk to you about what we've done in our childhood, you know. Because it was good times.
Yeah.
It was always good times, you know. We did have a couple falling outs from other people, and I think we grew from that, and I grew from how to build relationships with people and always be honest.
Yeah. Do you know what? Let's start off with that, in the sense of, like, because I know for a fact, like, it was quite interesting. We both knew, and there's of course like a few other fallen soldiers. We both knew that, in the sense that there was like 3 of us in a friendship group, but then there was then a case where we're then hanging around with like another 30 people. It sounds as though like it was some like form of gang, but it really wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Loads of us just
it was not a gang.
walking around and like.
It was the only thing you could do in a small town.
Yeah.
You know, Northampton don't have much. Yeah. So all we had to do was go into the town centre and sit in McDonald's.
Literally. And like, what do you think? Like, let's say, of course, like, what do you think has gotten you to the point that you're at now, in the sense of like how you like look at things, from going from being in that sort of setting where like a lot of us had no idea what we wanted to do in terms of like career-wise. We were just kind of just living like day by day, which was good because we just allowed ourselves that opportunity. But then it then meant that we're often faced with like a lack of direction. How do you think it's like, how have you been able to navigate through that?
Well, you know, at school, I didn't enjoy it one bit. I can't lie there. I hated it. Yeah. It weren't for me. I don't like reading. I didn't like writing, and throughout school, it was trouble. I think sometimes I take my emotions out on people, and I had no one I thought to really guide me through school, and I don't think anyone does, because your parents ain't in school with you. Yeah. You don't know what other people are like. People are very sly at school. You know, it's so I think you sort of just get day by day. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to be in the army. That's what I just wanted to do. I wanted to be in the army. I love this country, always have. That's something I wanted to do as a kid. But you don't hear about apprenticeships or the army at school. They go, you got to go sixth form. You got to get your grades to go sixth form, or you're a failure. Yeah. I think that's how they put it across. You are a failure if you don't get to that. If you don't get to that point. So you go to your careers advisor. You tell them what they want to do, and they just ignore you. Yeah. They don't care about you. They just want to get through the students because they got their targets to reach. And I'm sitting there with her. I said, I want to be in the army. She went, yeah, but is that fair on your family? I'm trying to, but that's what I want to do. I like the fitness side of it. I like the discipline of it. I think it would have been great for me at the time. She really just put something in my head, and I didn't want to do it. It was crazy how much it switched.
Do you feel like that? Do you feel like she kind of got to you in that sense, in terms of like convincing you that it wasn't a good option?
It's like she got into my soul.
Yeah.
I don't know how she done it, but she got in my soul, you know. And I thought, I want to be maybe something in a public sector, firefighter. I didn't want to be in the police. I thought, do firefighter. Yeah. And again, she's like hard to get into. And I thought, water, fire. I just said to her, plumbing. Yeah. I don't know, plumbing. And she went, that's good. Do you know how you'd get to that? I said, no, that's why I'm here, for you. I don't know, I'm not doing your job. Yeah. You know, you tell me how to lead. School ain't for me. And my dad is a builder. He's got his own building company. You know, he does nice work. And I think he said plumbing. He said, I don't want you to do what I'm doing. You don't want to be out in the rain digging holes in the middle of January where they're frozen, and you don't want to do that. I'm not letting you do it. I said, okay, fair enough. Let me do this plumbing. He said to me, you'll never meet a poor plumber. And I was like, okay, if it makes you some money, okay, I'm happy with that. I don't really know. So they just said to me, I went to Moulton, and they just said, focus on your maths and English, which I did, and I think it was our year where they messed up all the grades massively. And I think I just missed out on the English spot, but I never went back to them. A lot of people went back to them. Like, I remember some people who wanted to go sixth form, they didn't even get in, but then they resent their tests and they got in. And you're like, I should have done that, but I just done it. I carried on college, and it weren't a bother because I'm only doing that. And when I got into college, I loved it. I loved, like, I don't know, the documents, all the building documents, the water documents, the science. I hated science at school, didn't enjoy it, didn't get it because I couldn't imagine that science being put into normal life.
Even on that, like, let's say, for example, that's something that I kind of like think about quite a lot, where it's like a lot of things that we're learning in school, like, it's not tailored to someone that's a visual learner. Like, I remember me and you, we used to sit together, like, next to each other in majority of our classes, and it was English, for example, where we both were like the bouncers in that classroom, where in other classrooms, everyone's like begging us to like shut up. But in these classes, we're like, yo, Mrs. Talking, man, like shush.
Don't talk. You better not talk.
Don't talk. And then it was one of those things where it's like, but because I remember Miss Court, and the way she navigated that classroom, and she made it digestible for different people.
She improved me in English. I started to enjoy English a lot, and it was such a shame because they changed the class. That school was a mess in itself, but like she
really was.
She had to do something else, and I thought I was going to have you until the end of my GCSEs. That's what you told me. I'm here.
Oh my God.
You're improving me massively, and then it just.
You've just like, I'm like, that
put
was
a block in it.
That was a distant memory, but now I've just remembered because we were all like, I used to help you with English, you used to help me with maths, and then it got to the point where we'd then like really, really got so engaged with everything, and then that's when suddenly, like, that's when Miss had to, like, she was like giving birth to a kid, so she was on maternity leave, and then you get a supply teacher who's like coming in with like some random work that's not necessary to what we're doing.
And that supply teacher can't even speak English. Not like that. I mean, like, not good at English at all. That come out wrong.
No, I'm joking. But no, I get what you mean, because it's like, it was kind of like, okay, I've just had to come here and I have to kind of get through this bit, and I'm literally just here temporarily. And where they're thinking like, our GCSEs are like 3 months' time. Why are we just sat here like going through of mice and men for like the fifth time?
I'm sorry. I want to go back onto what I said. Best thing to describe it as is we got art and math teachers teaching us English. So they didn't know how to do English.
Good
That's
save.
what I meant to say.
Good save. No, I get what you mean, because it makes such a difference. Where there were some classes where it's like, honestly, like the only option I had was for me to kind of like either chat with somebody or literally just be completely zoned out, because it was like, how am I supposed to digest this? How am I, like, especially with me, like I'm again like a visual learner, and then you're going through all these numbers, you're going through all this stuff so quickly, and then when you're asking questions, it's like you're a distraction. Then when you're not engaged, it's then a problem. So I found that quite interesting.
I think the best way to put it, schools teach fish how to climb trees. It's never going to work, but their swimming is unbelievable. You know, and they don't put you in the right direction at all. That personally, what I got in school.
So how did, like, even with, let's say, for example, with your apprenticeship, how did you then like find out about that, and how did you then, like, what was like the application process?
So I started to read more into apprenticeships when I went to Moulton, because when you do a job like mine, you have to have an apprenticeship. You can't just have the level 2 diploma. You have to have an MVQ, because you can't go on site and stuff like that. So the only way to get that is an apprenticeship. So you look at it and you think, at the time, you're only 17, I thought, I'll just do the first year, see where it takes me if I enjoy it. And I remember that class had 60 people and it dropped down to 15 or something like that because people didn't want to do it. But I stuck at it and I finished that course 6 months, something like that, and you had a year to do it. So I was really hands-on. I love the science behind it. Like, there's a lot of science in plumbing. There really is, and I don't think people realise that. But that science I got, and I'm thinking this is basic knowledge, should be taught to everyone. You know, like what goes on in your house, like to your boiler, to turning off the water, because I've seen it destroy people's houses and it can kill people. That's just how intense it is. And I don't know, I loved that learning, and I just couldn't believe it, because I thought at school I was just messing around doing whatever I wanted to being the teacher's pet. And I'm like, how did it get to this? But you definitely learn through your journey. And then my apprenticeship, I was recommended by the college to a company.
Okay.
So I was, like I say,
as in Molten, or
Molten put me forward to a company, which is good of them, like, because it did get me that apprenticeship. I went for the interview and I got it.
Oh, Molten, where it started.
Yeah, exactly. And considering how bad the colleges turn, I honestly couldn't believe they started my career. The teachers in there recognised me, that I could fit into the trade. You know, there was people in there who were very clever, and you think, what are you doing here? But they knew I'd fit in with that company and what I described, which I to be honest, I'm so thankful for.
I find that interesting, because it's one of those things where, like, I know, like, on my aspect, it was like I didn't even ever consider apprenticeships at all, because they were never spoken about. It was like you said earlier, it was either like sixth form, university, or fail. Whereas, like, let's say you look at plumbing, you look at scaffolding, you look at bricklaying, all these different like labour jobs where, yes, it might not be the most attractive job, but it's like, even like as an estate agent, like, what would you be selling if these people weren't building these houses?
It's very true.
It's then one of those things where I remember, like, going back to Molten, like, JP, like our coach for the rugby, when I told him, I was like, after first year, I was like, JP, I don't think I want to come back. He was like, all right, what are you going to do? And I said, well, a mate of mine has like found out about like plumbing, like, and he was just like, he's like, he's like, you're not a labour man. I was like, do you know what? I was like, I didn't even take it as an insult. I was like, I'm actually not. Look at these hands, man. Like, they're soft. They're soft as hell, man. I was like, and then I was like, fair enough. And then that's when I gave it like 2 weeks, and then it was then through someone else who then found an apprenticeship in Northampton to then go like do real estate and like be like in sales negotiator. And I was like, okay. So then this was before I then moved back to London again. And I remember I started looking on Google. It took me like literally 9-10 months. And I then found like this like apprenticeship training agency, go to the interview. The guy's then like, I'm interviewing for, let's say, the company was like Coopers of London, and then they were like estate agents in Mayfair. And then as I'm talking to him, he's getting to know me, he's asking the right questions, like for once, like which like careers advisors weren't doing at school. And that was what I found that helped, is that he'd been in the same situation as me, where he was able to relate to me, and then it put me at ease, because I'm thinking, okay, do you know what? You actually get where I'm coming from. Whereas I find it not necessarily like, it's not like a complete challenge, but I find it difficult when you're talking to someone who hasn't like kind of at least walked in your shoes, can't empathise with your journey. But that really helps, because then he then said, you know what, like, I know you've applied for these guys, but I want to put you forward for this company instead, because I feel like you've got what it takes to kind of like do good there as well. You've got the drive that's needed. And like, God, was he right? Because now, come 7 years later, I'm now getting to a point where I'm like putting the pieces together to start my own business. And it's one of those things where I'm thinking, at school, teachers were like, wait until you get in the real world, wait until this happens. Do you think you're going to be able to do this and that? Whereas like, I started working after school, and I'm like, this is sick. I'm like, what? This is like your whatever you're learning, like with the apprenticeship, I was able to apply the next day. So then I'm then like studying, and I'm like, okay, so this is what I'm going to do tomorrow when I go into work. I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this. And I'm thinking, but that's because my brain likes to be busy. When you're sat there doing like the mundane stuff, like, yes, of course, in like adult life, you have to get used to it. But it's just interesting to me that whereas kind of like, we probably would have left school feeling so deflated, whereas other people felt like, yes, I'm one step closer to uni, I'm one step closer.
Yeah, well, that's like, I got my GCSE results, I got them, walked straight back out to school. I didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to entertain anyone there, and I just went home, I just took them to my mum, and then she opened them and she went, they're not even that bad.
What did you get again?
I got like 4 GCSEs and I missed English. So
it
wasn't even that bad, yeah.
Solidarity, yes.
It wasn't even that bad, but if the thing is with maths, I remember being in like not bothering, and then
come on, yeah, Miss Moody.
I had Miss Moody, and she was like, "No, look, do this." And next thing you know, I'm in top set.
Yeah.
And then people are in there like, "What are you doing in here?
You left
sent
me.
out.
You literally left me.
You've been sent out of class.
Set.
Yeah, you've been sent out of class. No, I'm here." And then you get some of them kids like, "Oh, how did you do better than me?" And I'm like, I don't know. Maths is just the subject for me.
Yeah.
Love numbers, you know, a bit weird. It's weird, isn't it? Like how crazy you can love some things and absolutely hate the other things. But we had subjects at school. We had to do 5 subjects on top of 4 other subjects. Yeah. Like humans ain't meant to deal with it like that.
No.
I don't think personally.
No.
I think we should focus on one thing we really want to do and go from there. I think that's what schools should do.
It's interesting you say that, because my mum's always said that, in the sense of that whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher or like a boss or anything, you should, instead of like focusing on what someone's lacking, like find what makes them tick, and then build up on that. Because like it is one of those things in school, like yes, like we were getting in trouble for talking loads, but then now we're like, I'm gonna toot my own horn and toot your own horn as well, in the sense like we're now like just next level customer service people because we've learned how to navigate different relationships. We were able to sit down with teachers and say like, "Miss, we think this," or "Sir, like we think this could actually help us learn." And we were like we did try to kind of be like, this is what we need.
They want to improve on stuff, but they never did.
Yeah.
Like you tell them all this stuff you wanted, and they didn't listen.
No.
They really didn't. Oh, it's such a shame. But they want you to be an adult, and they don't treat you like adults.
Yeah.
It's you sit there and be quiet, and you're like, okay, and everyone's just writing like we're all in the military, you know. I think apprenticeship, is the way forward.
Yeah.
I think try to look for an apprenticeship first, because like you say, people in your job, they went to university and then went there, but you done the apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And you learn on the job.
Yeah.
I think learning on the job is so unique. It's better. I don't think anyone understands how much better it is.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember like when I first like started, when I was like doing like the real estate apprenticeship, and I remember it was like they were like, okay, well we've not given apprentices like targets before, and they're like, okay, we're going to give you an 80 grand target. And I was thinking, oh my god, how am I going to do that? Like I was genuinely like, with my coursework, with I'd gone straight from college into like first year college into my job. I was like thinking, right, this is so different. You're navigating like office politics. You're navigating like so many different like personalities.
No one's taught you how to do that at school.
Not at all. And it's then one of those things where I was like, okay, I kind of like maybe 2 months in, I was like kind of like shadowing people. I was like, okay, this is what he's doing well. This is what I'm definitely not going to do. And it was one of those things where it was great, because then suddenly I'm now applying exactly what I'm learning straight into my job, and like focusing on, right, this is what this person's doing well. I'm going to try and practice that in this conversation with this client. And then I quickly found myself to a point. I remember there was 1 month where I billed like 65 grand in 1 month, and I was like 2 deals off breaking the all-time record. I was like just turned 18. Bearing in mind, like I was then thinking to myself, as I'm doing that, I'm like, what were these teachers talking about? Like my mouth has now landed me in opportunities that I would have never dreamt of ever being in, because I've never been shy to be like, this is what I want, this is what I want to do. So
no, exactly. I think you're built for that as well.
Yeah, man. Give it a gab in
there. That's it, yeah. It's coming like Del Boy.
Yeah. And there's also one thing I would like even want to mention, because I know I know you've experienced it as well. We've spoken about it, where it's like, I feel as though like that level of pressure that's like kind of put on our shoulders like from so young to be like, right, you've got to have the answers, you've got to do this. When I was your age, I was doing this, like you should be doing that. Why are you not doing that? Why don't you own a house here? Why don't you do? And you're just thinking, hang on a minute,
society's changed
like so much. And it's one of those things where like, you know, for a fact I'm very open about, like, let's say like in the past where I was like, it was like pure, it like all of that pressure kind of led me to this thing, do you know what, let me just like go down the substance route, let me like drink a lot, let me like just numb that, sort of try and numb it. But like from your perspective, like, because I know for a fact like now you're making much better choices for yourself, for your like girlfriend, for your daughter, and yeah, like how do you think, like what's like helped you to kind of like move over that?
I think you definitely try. Like when I was first an apprentice, there was a lot going on in your head. Oh, how do I make more money? And you're only a year into it, and you're thinking, I can't. Like, there's a lot going through your head, and especially if you're going through in and out relationships, you just think, I'm just going to mask it with alcohol. And I did that. I think I'd done that for a long time. I remember one year, I'm taught 3 times a week going out. Once in the week, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday you're just sleeping. You wake up Monday and you just think, I hate life. I hate life, you know, and it's a horrible place to be in. It really is, you know, and drinking definitely gave me a second personality. And I weren't like that sober. It starts to get worse and worse. You start to get a bit more aggressive, and you're definitely not control of yourself. And then one day you read other stuff about life and mental health, and what I've done is just accepted my life. I think if that's one thing, you've got to accept your life and how your life is. Everyone's life could be better. You could be brought up in Buckingham Palace, but look at Harry. He wants a different life. Some people dream to have that life, you know, and he's just thrown it all away. And I think it don't matter if you want to get somewhere, you've got to do it. You just got to get up and do it. And when you realise that, your life definitely improves massively.
It's kind of weird because you kind of go through like, well, Joe, I'll speak for myself in this regard. Like I kind of, when I had like that sort of moment where I was just like, why am I like, I got to a point, especially like after I started therapy, like I got to a point where I was like, why am I, I became sick of like blaming people when I'm like, oh, this person's did this person spoke to me like this person, and I was just like, do you know what? It's me that's choosing to cling on to this, and when I kind of snapped out of it, it's weird. It feels like, you know, like when you're playing like Street Fighter or something, or Mortal Kombat, and you power up and you're like, yo, and you're just like,
literally, someone would say something to you and you'd be so reared up. It's like, why? I look at me back now and I wish I could just say to me, just chill out. You don't need to have all this anger built up. Like, you might want to live a different life, or the way your life you're struggling a little bit, but honestly, you've just got to get through it. Get through that time of your life, and honestly, it'll come out good as long as you keep at it, you know.
No, but I get that, because I remember like it was 2018. I remember it was like September. And I remember I was like, I never go on Facebook, and for some reason, like something just made me download like iMessenger again. And the first message I saw when I opened it, and I was like at my desk eating lunch, and then it was like I forgot who'd messaged me. It was one of the guys from our school, and they were like, mate, like, have you heard the news about like David? And I was like, what? And I was just like, and next thing you see, like, well, okay, like he's like taking his own life. And I was thinking, man, like the first thing that like came up for me was, it was like, I think we were in year 11, and that's when we like...
Yeah, he started doing the rugby. Yeah. Like, it was like, that's when I started to speak to him a lot more. Was definitely rugby.
Because I used to like see him, remember BST? I used to see him in BST, and obviously he was just like swollen, man, like just muscle.
He was a big guy. He was a big guy.
He like turns to me in IT, and he was like, Shingie, like kind of being like super nervous. You know what he was like? He was just like all the K words in Polish and or whatnot. And
I think it's hard to come from a different country to especially when you don't know English and that. I think you're gonna be.
Oh, but he did well, man.
You know? He did, yeah.
But that moment, I was like, it was endearing, because he just turns to me, and he was sat next to me. He's like, Shingie, like, he's like, you know, like, is it okay if I like come to like rugby training with you? I was like, what? I was like, we need you.
Yeah.
We need you.
We were going around because we were like captain of the team, just recruiting the biggest guys you could get.
Going around school, just creating this army. Yeah. But then it was, what was that school? Like Quinton House or something?
Yeah, Quinton, we're going to a private school.
Yeah.
They're going to smash us. They're going to be big guys there. And we ruined
them. And then I remember it was like you that popped the ball to David. And he just went, scored. And it was like...
He had 5 people on him. And he got through it.
I
couldn't see anything like it, especially when you're like 16. You're like, I don't even see this at the Saints.
No.
Literally, he powered it. It was so good.
Yeah, but it's like, it hurt me like differently because I was like, I remember literally thinking back to that moment, and then I was then thinking, like, a part of me was kind of like, it didn't help at the time. I was already going through stuff. I was drinking a lot because I was like drinking a lot with like you lot, work a lot, and then it was just like any excuse at the time. And then when that happened, I was like, that's what I remember. I picked up my first book and I read my first book ever, and it was one of those things. I was like, okay, once I've started like going through the book, I realised I was like, this hit me so much because I could relate to that because I've kind of like dealt with that even throughout school of like thinking about like those sorts of like suicidal thoughts. But then like, I don't know whether it's the right word to say courage or whatever. It's like kind of always stopped me, and I've always been like, but there's always been a voice inside of me that's kind of been like, but like why? Like, come on, you've come this far, just see what's around the corner.
Further, just a little further.
Like, what's that door here? Just keep swimming. Actually, I don't want to get copyright.
Disney will come after you.
Exactly. Well, it's like, but it's one of those things. I was like, I could relate to it, and then a part of me then kind of felt like, okay, like if I'd like reached out to him more, could I have done this? Could I have done this? When it's like, do you know what? But this is why like we're sat here now, and I owe you a thanks. I hope I say it enough, like, off camera, in the sense of like I've always appreciated you for that, because we've got very like masculine fathers, but we've always been very like gentle with you, like each other to some degree. And that's always that I've always appreciated that, because things that I would never feel like comfortable saying to certain people, because they'll be thinking, oh, stop being a P words, like stop being a like this and be a man.
Can never relate to you.
Nah. And then it kind of makes you then feel worse, because you feel like, oh, do you know what, maybe I'm weak, when in reality it's like vulnerability is like the biggest strength, because you're like, you know what, this is me accepting my life, as you said earlier, and I'm okay with it. If in order for me to be able to move through this, I need to accept it.
I think definitely being more of a man is showing your emotions, because you really want your kids to see that. I feel like if you don't see your parents, no emotion, nothing like that, I don't think you can control your emotions as well. If everything's just arguments, no communication, I think you will betray that in the future, especially on your kids. And that's why it's so hard. Like me, having Lara, your life changes, you know. I get to be a bit emotional, you know, because she's really showed me life. And her little face.
even like yesterday, when like, cause it was like my second time meeting her, and I remember like yesterday, it was one of those things where, because of my nieces, I know like not to take it personally when kids take time to warm up to you. Oh yeah. But it was like we were literally just like playing peekaboo, and the next thing she's like running after me, and I'm just like, ah! And I'm just like, kids like, same with my nieces, where they just snap you out of it. You're just there thinking like, these lot, all they want to do is eat, poo, sleep, wake up, play, and life is like this, like, and we're here like, oh my God, bills, breaks.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
real stuff.
Exactly. The heat in my car's gone. I'll pay for this. you know, it's just funny because that situation, at least it's like, we need the heating done. I've got the money for it. I'm like, yeah, just give it another week. Like it's not going to make me struggle. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? I've got a daughter there. She needs to be warmed up. It's coming up to November. Like.
You're just there wrapping her up in a blanket.
Yeah,
like, no,
a couple of blankets will be all right. Yeah.
But it's and I'm glad, because like honestly, like the way I've seen anyway, like obviously now I've gotten the chance to experience you being around her, like, and even Elise as well. Like you're both like, I'm just sit there and I sit back and I'm like, you make me so excited for that opportunity when I'm then in that situation, because I'm like, we're both like, at least like 23 as well. Well, you're 24 now, and it's like you're both 24, but like the way you're just like, it's like you're just, like you said, you're just swimming, you're floating, you're taking it as it comes. Like, yes, you've got a very odd cat, but your daughter, like, you've done so well, and I'm like, honestly, like, and I'm really glad to see you like become the way you are now, as a whole, because even, yes, of course, there might be a time where you're like, Laura, come on, darling, like, daddy's getting sad.
My patience is,
But the fact that you're trying is what matters, and because that's one thing that I think, like, even like growing up, it was one thing that used to bother me a lot, like as you mentioned, like whether, like for me, I experienced like a lot of arguments, I experienced like a lot of chaos at home, and then you're then expected to go into, like, going back to school, you're expected to go into school and be like, you know what, I'm ready to apply myself, I'm ready to succeed, and I'm thinking like, like I've got things that are like, especially with a photographic memory, like things that are ringing around my head like throughout the day.
But that's what. But like it's true. We were at school, and like you say, we'll be like, today's gonna be the day. It's gonna be routine now. I'm gonna be good, whatever. But you get the blame for everything, even though it weren't you. And honestly, they'll put you down on everything. It's like that PE teacher. You know how good I was at sport? I got put down to the lowest set because he didn't like me. He didn't. He blamed everything on me. I'd be standing there and he'd be like, Tyler, stop talking. No. I wasn't. Why are you backchatting me? And then my mum had to go in there and say, like, what are you trying to do? Tyler's never been naughty in PE or sport. Like, that's his thing. He loves it. And a lot of teachers, I think, were a bit baffled.
Yeah, because I remember it was Miss Barford. Miss Barford was like, because it was funny, the fact that she then but looked after like your brother and his best mate, who were very similar to us, and she basically had like generations of nightmares, basically.
Literally, she used to say to us, you remind me of Jed and Deshan, you two are the exact same.
But it was through people like her, like, where I was like, okay, do you know, it felt nice to have like a teacher that's got your back, that's got your best interest at heart.
The thing is with Miss Barford, she was in the real world. Yeah. She could connect to us, and she knew what would happen through life at home. She knew what it was like. Other teachers, unfortunately, I don't think have that emotion with a child. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And like you say, they used to say, like, you got to go uni. Yeah. Now I make more money than 90% of them.
And it's true. And it's not even.
And I thought I would never get to that. That's how they made me feel. I thought I'd never get to that. Yeah. Like, that's like, I know it sounds horrible, like probably a bit nasty to say, or
I don't agree, because I think because where some people try to like make you feel as though there's a ceiling in life, in actual fact, it's like what I've grown to realise, especially like some companies like that I've like worked at, I've almost been like, and this isn't to brag, I've almost been too much of a like personality who had too much energy for them, that they're then thinking like, what the hell do I do with this guy? And it reminds me anyway of like what it was like in school, where I'm like, yes, of course, like I find it difficult to sit still. Yeah. However, like when I find like history, I remember like sometimes like as much as like I remember it was Miss Payne, and there were times where like I would be answering all the questions because I'm like, I literally played the campaign of like Call of Duty World at War,
Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, and I was like learning all about history, about World at War, about like World War II, and all these things from games, and then applying it into school. And then it got to a point where nobody wanted to answer questions. She's like, all right, Shingie, what's the answer? And I'm like, that's when I was engaged. Whereas if you've then got a teacher where they're, let's say for example, they're like on your case. I remember there was times where I'll be sitting someone to more quiet than me, and they'll be like, the old teacher, I see, it's like PTSD, the teacher will turn around like, Shingie, and then they're like, it wasn't him. And they're like kind of looking at the person to be like, why are you defending him for? And it's like, it literally wasn't me, my head was just down. And then when you then react, it's like, oh, go outside. You're like...
And then you lock the lockers.
Yeah, you know? Lockers. Those little square things in the ceiling.
Like, no one tells you how to deal with your anger. Really don't. I've been, like I say, I've been to a couple places to like, well, right. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Gone doctors once, and they just thought. I think I'll come back to another thing. With the anger and probably bad thoughts running through my head, when I went to the doctors, they said, I can just give you tablets. And then and then what clicked in my head is, you're not going to help me. I've got to help myself here. You doctors ain't here for me. You're just going to give me tablets. I'll probably get hooked on them. I've seen people do it, and they make you more depressed. They do. They seriously do. And I was like, I'm not going down that route. I'm not going down that route. And then you really try to do stuff. And now I'm just happy. Yeah. I look back at what I've got. I've started off with a decent house. I've got a beautiful child. Yeah. Like I love Elise to pieces. Yeah. And I'm happy with them things. I don't like as well. We used to have a lot of friends and interact massively. Yeah. I just want my family. Yeah. Just want Elise and Lara, and I'm happy to go around with them. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like I got to the point. If I want to go out, I'll go out with Elise. Because I'd just rather her by my side. Mate. No, it's you know what I mean.
I'm only joking. Yeah,
you know, that's I just like.
You don't need like all of that.
The thing I like being with you because we relate on so many things. Yeah. Other people I just can't. I'm struggling to relate with.
And do you know what I find interesting? It was something that I kind of like got to a conclusion of after COVID, where I was just like, I spent for the first time ever in my life, I spent so much time by myself that I was then thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like there were so many things that were coming up for me all in that year, or like the first year, where I was just like, oh my, this is all the stuff I've been avoiding. This is everything I've been running away from. This is why I was so overwhelmed. And I was like, and it didn't help because but when like one of my close mates, his mum passed away, and I used to call her mum, like I met him at Malton as well when we were boarding there. And it was one of those things where it was like, that knocked me sideways, like, because I was like, right, I'm already like very much isolated. I'm not really, and I'm not somebody that feeds, I don't need other people's energy for me to feel up, but I like being around good people because
of course.
It's like elevates it. And I remember that was when I kind of got to a point where I was like, right, you can't keep smashing substances. You can't keep like drinking, like all this stuff, like, actually give yourself the opportunity to let all of that come up. It's ugly, man. Like I know people are like, horrible, do some yoga, have like a acai bowl, and I'm like, yo, it's not as the pretty side of mental health that people always talk about. It's like you're there. Like sometimes I've literally like broken down at my desk, and I'm like, people are then like, oh my God, what do I do? Like Shingie's normally like my happiest person ever, but I'm like, there's only so far a mask can go until you're then like, you know what? I don't have the energy to keep it up anymore. But it helps, like you say, like it helps to have like that team in your corner where it's like, okay, the people that want your best interest or have your best interest at heart. Because then where like, for example, like I don't typically, like my phases like when I'm like down don't really last long, but what I found like kind of triggers me a bit more is when people are like, oh mate, just look on the bright side, just look at this. Whereas I've learnt to kind of, I don't know if it's through therapy, just learnt to kind of be like, do you know what, if someone's having a moment, they're having a moment.
Yeah, you can't get out of it, you can't look at no bright side.
That's what I mean. You need to just push through it and see it for what it is and then move on. Whereas if you're then like suppressing it, that's when you just feel like you're gonna pop.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's horrible. A lot of, like in my job, follow some people, and there's a guy on there, he's like a plumber as well, it's called PB Plumber, and he does a lot for men's mental health, and it's good to see because there's a lot of people in the trade killing themselves. I think it's one of the top jobs where men are killing themselves, and I think it's because you can't go on site and you got to be a man. Things, I know you got things in society now where it's like, you don't have to be as manly and stuff like that. No, you do.
On site, it's really on site.
It's rough. Yeah. It is. It's like you got people on there who are big, they're strong. You don't want to get conflict with them. You can't say the wrong things, but you also don't want to be taken advantage of. Yeah. And I think that's why I think a lot of people take their own lives in that. And I think maybe it should calm down a little bit. I think it's great what he's doing.
Do you think it's on that as well? Like, do you think it's because, like, for me anyway, I've always found like when those thoughts really start to like creep in, it's because I'm like feeling trapped, or let's say in like a couple of like, I'll say maybe one or two jobs that I've had in the past, like I've had to, especially like in sales, like I've had to alter who I am so much to a point where it's like to be able to fit in, I now have to be like nasty to people. I don't have to think like somebody that I'm not. Whereas like I can openly say like, yes, I know how to set boundaries and I don't take poo, but I allow like I set boundaries, but at the same time I know for a fact I'm a very like soft person. I like I like being nice to people, because it's like I know full well that sometimes I need it, so why don't other people, like why can't I give that to other people? But as much as I think like, yes, of course, like there are people who are like saying like, do you know what, men need to be more open. And then there's other people like, nah, like this generation, I like marshmallows, they're like softies. And it's like, listen, just be like, I feel that shouldn't stop. Even if there are the select few who are thinking, oh my God, like this generation's gone soft, and people are saying this about like, whether it's like, I don't know, like whatever people are saying, where it's like, oh, at the end of the day, things are progressing. And I think it's conversations like this where maybe somebody might listen and think, okay, do you know what? Because there's no blood, there's no slang, there's none of that. You can actually take like, I hope that's what happens, where people can actually just be like, oh, it's not as like, oh, like you're so young, there's no, like, what are you stressed about? Whereas it's like, a lot of you older people have then passed on your stresses or your pressures or projecting onto young people.
I think you're very right. I think the older people accepted a lot from governments, the way they started to live, and it's not affected them, it's affected us. And then they try to blame it on us, when it's them the ones who said yes in the first place to these things. You know, I think that's my opinion on it, anyway, with like the older generation.
I agree, because even like working in property, I remember like it was something where it's like people are like, oh, what, you're not out of like home yet? And I'm like, when I've like, I can even be honest about it. I remember I was renting with my brother and my best mate, like, or one of my best mates in like Hackney, like throughout lockdown. And being an ex-estate agent at the time, I was then calculating, I was like, how much have I spent on rent, bills? And it was like 15,000. And I remember my mum literally, like, she looked like she wanted to slap me. And she was like, could you not have stayed home and then saved that? But because of that pressure to be like, oh, like, I can't be at home, like, everyone else is moving
society's
out.
telling me I've got to move out, and then, like you say, your parents are like, no, you could have just stayed in.
I could have just stayed at home and like, having better food than I could cook for myself. Like, what? But it's
surviving on pot noodles.
And kimchi from Costco. Honestly, I was like, it got to the point where I was like, man, like, I was like, right, we were making the most rogue meals. I felt like I was at uni. I was like, I remember one time I just had toast, bread, and like, no, toast, like the toast was the bread. Toast, beans and sausages, and like, and a bit of cheese, and God knows I was surviving off Toasties like breakfast, lunch and dinner for like a good month. I was like, bruh.
It's not the way to live. No. It's really not.
Whereas now it's like Oxford.
But yeah, exactly. As well, we live renting. Everyone loves renting now. No one, but I think people who haven't got support, I don't know how they can afford it. Yeah. I think it's
easy for someone to say like, oh, well, when it was my day, my like property cost like 60 grand. And it's like, I remember I saw something where it was like in like the 1980s or around that time, it was like, it was a property, or to be able to purchase a property, you only needed 3 times, or what was it? It was like between 3 and 27, which I know is a big number. Time is more than your salary to be able to afford it. Whereas I think now it's got into like 196%.
It's crazy now, mate. I've got a mortgage, and when they send you that interest, you're like, what? Mate, it's double my house. But interest, and it's only worse at the minute. I think that's quite scary. You know what? You're on the property ladder. Just if you can do it. But as well, another thing is, if I tell people I bought a house at my age, they automatically go, "Oh, did you get a lot of help?"
Yeah.
No, not one bit. I was living like doing nothing for a year solid. All my money was being put away. Like, weren't going out. Like, you live in the bare minimum, and it weren't a bad thing. I enjoyed it. I'm a minimal person, like, you know. But now I've got Lara and I'm in my house, but then bills they're crazy.
They hurt.
Yeah, it does. But because I was saving so much at the time, it's pretty much the same, so I haven't really felt it, and plus I earn a bit more money now, so it's not too bad, but you worry a lot. Yeah. I thought mental health was bad at school, but
nah, man, this is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, this is real life, and it's scary.
And I find it interesting because I feel like even though, yes, of course, like, and I agree with you, like when you're in adulthood, like it's a whole different ballgame. But then I also feel like what would potentially help, like, or what would have helped when we were younger, is like that one person to just be like, listen, like, to actually explain it as opposed to just saying, like, suck it up, being it's only going to get worse from here, but it is, what you learn now is going to like massively, or the skills you learn now, like even like things I do now, like meditation, journaling, and I'm like, if I'd known to do those things when I was younger, God knows I would have felt way more equipped to then enter the real world, being like, okay, if I'm stressed, it's how I can handle it, instead of allowing it to kind of bottle in, drink, end up going in towards anger, when in reality I'm like, mate, I just need a hug, man. I don't want to lash out, I don't want to get angry, I just need love. It's then like, if that's something that we can like start, I guess we're doing it now. So like we can start talking about that and actually encouraging people to just be like, no, like there's, whether you're like, you feel like you're an absolute loony, which I sometimes feel like it, but I'm like, there's always then, like for every 5 people that think I'm not a weirdo, there's then that one person that's like, no, I know what you're actually like, you're nothing like that, or you're like this and this, and then you kind of come back to your senses and say, no, like those people aren't right, and you can push through it. So
I think definitely just learning about life in general, you've got to go through it. I don't think you can just look at someone else's situation and judge on it. You really got to live it, and it's, I don't know, just enjoy life, really. Just, I think people stress about way too many things, like, oh, we've got to get Balenciagas, you know, got to get this, but it's on a credit card. No, but you know what I mean, though.
Let me hide my shoes. Let me hide my shoes.
Yeah, but you've always been interested in clothing. I haven't. I'm not bothered, you know. You've always had a passion for that since we were younger. Like, you like your shoes and... So, thanks,
Tyler. And do you know what? Like, thank you for that. And like, before like we kind of like close off, like I got asked this question in like the last episode, like with my mentor, and I want to ask you that question because I'm actually so interested to hear your or what you have to say. Like, if you were to give advice to, like, let's say 14 to 16-year-old Tyler, like now, what do you think you would say, and like why? Like, why is it something you'd advise?
I would probably just tell my younger self, just carry on. Just carry on and don't worry as much. I think, because I used to worry a lot when I was younger, and I think if I didn't worry, nothing would have changed. Honestly, I'm just telling myself, just carry on doing what you're doing. It might not seem like it's the right path at the minute, but you'll get there. And I think I personally think I've achieved a lot. I've got a family, a very beautiful family, got a house, and to me, I think that's my achievement. And the next step is something I'll just have to look to in the future. And now I think it's just to focus on my family and build something for us, you know. So in the next 10 years, you're going to be okay. I think that's what I just say. You're going to be okay. And I think young kids need to hear that. Everything's going to be okay. Just don't go down the bad path of like violence or crime. Just avoid it, and everything else will be fine. It will come. It will. I think it will if you just...
I agree, man, honestly, because like I genuinely, I don't like to look back on the past, but sometimes it comes up and it's good because it's like a reminder. I like to look back on it as a reminder as opposed to dwelling on it. And when I look back at like the paths that we could have taken and the paths that some people that I once called friends, and you're just thinking like, oh my God, like that's where I would have been heading had I not just been patient or been like patient with myself.
Could have easily have ended in prison.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Easily could. And like, that's what I think. One thing now people say, oh, I didn't realise you were like this. I was like, you judged on me on things I didn't know about when I was 14. You're trying to be like everyone else, and everyone else at that time was listening to rap music, drill music. Everyone wants to be like that because it was the thing at the time.
RMT, where the hardest.
Morrison.
And no, honestly, and that's one thing I would like to say, like, is like well done to us both, because as much as like we used to cause carnage at school, it was one of those things where through that we've always had this. I've always noticed it in you, and you've always noticed it in me, where we've always had this like drive, this spark to just be
definitely.
like, I want to do things for myself, and I want to be the one that like takes my life, like, or like. Yeah, it takes my life to the point I want it to.
I think we were told we weren't going to stand out, and I think we're standing out the most.
That's a mic drop in itself.
That's a mic
drop in itself. No. Like, and honestly, like, thank you so much, bro, like, for being here. I appreciate it. I've, like, thoroughly, like, enjoyed this.
Thank you I appreciate it. I'm glad you're doing your podcast. I know we talked about it once, and I know you wanted to do it, and I think it's good, man. Just keep at it.
My guy. No, thank you, bro.
And you can dance.